Hello, my name is Jonathan with Advent House Plans. Welcome back to our video series on the assembly of the mansion-style Advent house that we sell as a kit on our website. Back here you see we've got our structure finished. If you haven't seen that video, check the links in the description and you can watch that as well. This video is going to cover the atrium, the structure assembly, the faces, and the final assembly, including painting. So to get started, you're going to start with the atrium kit, the structure kit. You're going to need the vellum, I think 3 or 4 sheets, super sharp X-Acto knife, all of the atrium faces, and you're going to need some CA glue. The CA glue we use is gap filling medium, the 5 to 15 second glue. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all the structure out. There's no need to number these parts. They're all very unique, and you'll see that it only can really go together one way. We'll also take all the atrium faces out, and then we'll take the atrium faces out, get them painted, and bring them back in. So we'll go ahead and get started by taking apart the structure. Alright, to get ready for the assembly of the structure, we'll get all these parts taken out of the kit. The best way to do that is I've got a nice hard surface here. This is an old shelf, and then I've covered it with plastic because we're going to be using CA glue and we don't want to get that everywhere. What we'll do then is we'll take these parts and we'll turn them upside down, and you'll find the locations of the tabs that we have left in the kit. There's not very many, and what you'll do is you'll push down from the back just to pop through or at least cut some of that material. After going through on cutting several of those, you'll be able to start popping this piece out. And it pops out cleanly. You'll then take out each of these tiny little spots. Now, because it's cut from wood, and wood is natural, sometimes it may not cut totally clean all the way through the back side on some of these things. Take your time, clean them up, get all of these little spots cleaned out. And this will be the back portion of our kit. It will go together like this, and you'll see that after we pop out all of the other parts out of the blocks. One thing to note regarding some of these smaller pieces, there is a beam and there's a beam with tabs on it for each of these. You're going to want to keep them together. They will glue together. So the 2 long ones go together, these 2 go together even though they're not the same length, then these 2, then these 2. So you'll probably want to keep those together as you start taking them out. As you're taking out these little tiny braces, notice that the one on the one end and the one on the other end have the extra long tab on the end here. You'll make note of that because they go in specific places. Otherwise, all these middle ones are identical. Okay, I've got all the parts cut out for the structure. We'll now move to the atrium faces and pop all those out. The atrium faces are cut from 16th inch basswood. There are several sheets of them. With these, be extra careful, they are more breakable. But you'll notice that there are tabs just the same on all these parts that if you just push them through very carefully, they pop out nice and clean, as well as the entire thing will pop out of its block. Now on each one of these atrium faces there will be a tiny little tab remaining on the bottom here on the top as well as on the faces. Those won't affect the structural integrity, but you may choose to clean them up. You can either come back with an X-Acto knife just ever so gently, or you can take a sander to them. Make note on these atrium faces there is technically a front and a back. On the back side you'll see these just light smoke marks because these parts are laser cut. On the front it's much cleaner and sometimes you see a smooth warming around the edges. The reason I bring up the front and back of the atrium faces is because we're going to take these out into the garage on a big piece of plastic and we're going to give them a light coat of green paint. You want to make sure that you're painting the front faces and not the back faces. A few of these parts are required to go in a specific way on the structure, and you'll see that later. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and take these out and get them painted, so while they're drying, I'll work on the structure. Alright, we're now ready to start the assembly of the structure. What we've done is we've collected all of our vertical bracing and we've combined them into two different piles here. If you put the face up so we don't see the smoke marks, you'll see that we have the same number of them, and what we're going to do is we're going to take one of each and we're going to glue them face to face so that we're seeing the smoke marks on the back. And the reason we do that is it creates an ever so slight concave here, which is going to allow for a much easier gluing later. We'll now go through and we'll glue up sets of these, one from each pile, face to face, and make sure that they're nice and square. Once they're all glued up, we're ready to start put them on the main structure. We're also going to glue up these two pieces. Same thing, we're going to go face to face so we see smoke marks and smoke marks. Make sure that these tabs down here are aligned so that they'll slide in where they belong on the structure. Okay, I've assembled the structure parts now that we're going to get ready to start putting together. These are the two back pieces. We're going to lay those down face. There's the words face down. The larger structure goes on bottom, and you'll see that they line up with the tabs up here. We've designed it fairly tight, but it should just tab in just like that. Once we get these three main pieces laid out, not yet glued, we're now going to start adding all of our bracing. Now before we add bracing, you need to make sure that these outer faces are smooth. In the case of this part, that's fine, but in the case of these braces we just glued up, you've got tab marks here and here. Each one of those need to be cleaned up because the atrium faces need to glue here. So I'm going to take each one of these out to my band sander, and I'm just going to real quick just buzz off all of those tips. Each one of these individual braces I've now taken to the sander, and you see I've just kind of taken the top edge. They're nice and smooth, ready for gluing to the atrium faces once the structure is assembled. I've now laid out all of my bracing parts on my pieces here, and you'll make a couple of notes. The two super tiny ones go way up here in the front, and they go with the angle to the outside edge. This guy sits right here. The longest one of these braces sits right here. The one that's the same length as that will sit next to it to provide additional support. And the tabs that we have here should fit in these holes nicely. You cannot put them in the wrong place because the tabs won't fit. You'll go ahead and set all those in place, including this one here. And then there are two pieces here, one's short and one's long. The longer one goes to this back one, this shorter one will glue in last because it goes in between these two vertical braces. This one up here is also just a little bit shorter than this one, and that's because we don't want it pushing out into the atrium face. So what we're going to do is we're going to glue in this part here, this part, these two, and these other braces here without gluing in these guys yet. There's no need to glue them in yet. So I'll glue that up and we'll hold it in place. Now while I hold these down and let them glue for just a minute, make note that we're not gluing the back piece to the bottom piece or the bottom piece to the top piece yet. We got to get all the braces in first. We've just lined it up to make sure things are lined up. We can now glue in this piece, the long piece here, not the short piece, but then we can glue in this long piece up here. Okay, we're now ready to put in the rest of the bracing. So the one with the triple hole will go here, so we're going to glue in this place here. And the matching one will go here. And once we get those glued in place, then this little piece will fit right in between them, and we'll glue it down right here. In the meantime, the ones with the longer tabs here go here and here. And then these individual little pieces, the curved side here will be used to help push it down, so it needs to be towards the center of the wall, the back wall. Now the one exception, I mentioned that there are two that have a little bit longer tail here. They must be on the outside edges facing down towards the bottom piece. Here's the other long piece, the long tab here, and it points towards the bottom piece. Note that all the curved sides are face in, here, 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 and the two extra long ones are out here, and then we'll glue all of these braces in the middle. When you're gluing these two front pieces up here, as well as these two pieces down here, you're going to want to make sure you hold them long enough so that they at least are mostly vertical. They will eventually go into these holes here, so they need to be mostly vertical. There will be a little bit of room for flex later, and we'll come back and add glue later, but try and keep them vertical. I then added glue to this piece as well and pushed it down in there, securing this area. Okay, I've added glue to all of the bracing that's attached to this back piece. We're going to let those dry by making sure this one and this one and this one and this one are mostly vertical. We're going to let it dry, and then we're simply going to tip up this top piece and it will sit into its holes, and then we will tip up the bottom piece and it will sit in its holes as well. We're going to let this sit and then we'll glue it up. Okay, we're going to tip up the top piece and align it with its tabs and align it with its holes, and just gently work it into all of its locations. And then we're going to run a bead of glue all the way across this seam right here that will provide the necessary glue both onto the bracing and between the back and the top. Let that dry. We'll repeat the process with the bottom one. Okay, once the upper bead here is dry enough that it's not going to be moving, we're just going to tip up this bottom one and we're going to slip it into its spot. You're going to start with the two tall ones that have the extra long piece here. Then you're going to work your way down, working it through the holes, and you'll see that down here this last one's just a tiny bit longer, and you'll see why when we actually place it on the house. Once you have it well pressed together, same thing, we're going to run a bead of glue across this front side all along the bottom of it, and then we'll be ready to add our vertical bracing. Okay, once you've added that bead across the back and let it dry, and now we have ourselves the majority of the structure, all that remains is adding these vertical bracings. Make sure that the back side of this is dried well before you start inserting these, because we are going to be doing some flexing in the top to the bottom, and you don't want the glue to pop loose back here. You also have the option at this point or after we add these bracings to come back and add additional glue anywhere you want on the structure. So I'm going to go ahead and let it dry, and then I'll come back and I'll add these vertical bracings. Okay, I've let the structure dry up just a little bit. It's pretty well cured now, well enough. We're now ready to add our vertical bracing. The vertical bracing goes in with the fat piece on the inside, and it sits in each one of these slots here and glues in like that. Now, getting all of them in before you glue it may become a bit of a challenge. Just be patient, get them all set in where they belong, then come back and add the glue later. Once all the braces are in place, you'll come back and add glue. You may find it easier to turn the whole thing over, because then you can apply downward pressure on each of these to get them to glue down. Be careful not to warp or twist it while you're gluing. Okay, what I've done is I've added glue to this one, this one, this one, and this one from the bottom, and I'm just going to hold it down like this until it's well set. I'll repeat on the other side, and then I'll repeat on this front one. Then with the bottom one set like this, we'll be able to glue the tops more easily. Okay, I've got the bottoms and tops of each one of the vertical braces gluing. Now there's just one more set of gluings you need to do. When we tipped up this top piece to the back, these 3 points here and the braces underneath, as well as these guys here, never got any glue. So we're going to come back, we're going to add glue down in here and add glue down in here and make sure that we hold this all together really well and get it all glued up, and it will be complete. Okay, and there it is. The atrium structure is now fully complete. We'll just let the glue finish drying while the faces finish drying with their paint as well. Once the faces are done, we'll take this structure out and we'll give it a quick coat of paint as well, just for looks, and then we'll be ready to add the faces to the structure. Alright, I've brought in the atrium faces from painting. They're nice and dry, so we're ready to attach them to the vellum. I have 2 sheets of vellum laid out on this nice hard surface, and what we're going to do is we're just going to lay them out like this. These will be on a sheet and these will be on a sheet. We then will add glue to the back side of them and we'll touch them down to the vellum. It is imperative that once you touch it to the vellum, do not move it. If you get streaks in these fields, you'll never get them off. So be super careful as you lay them down. So we'll do this one. Make note that you don't want to get glue too close to the inner windows because we don't want the glue pushing out into those spaces. So instead we'll keep the glue out by the outer edges. And we'll hold that for a second until the glue is well dried there. And then we're going to repeat for every single piece. We're going to glue them all down, let the glue dry, then we come back and trim. Do make note, they all fit on these 2 parts except for these 2 little ends here and these 2 ends here. They're just a little bit too long, but that's right, it won't affect it at all. So we'll go ahead and add glue and get these all laid down here. Alright, there are all of the atrium faces glued down to the vellum. We're now going to let that dry fully, then we'll come back and start trimming. Alright, the glue is dried on these atrium faces and we're now ready to start cutting them out. To do so, you're going to need a good sharp X-Acto knife with a nice tip, and make note that the material that you do this on is likely going to be cut. So just be aware of that. In short, all we're going to do is carefully run our blade right along the edge of the parts. Take your time. Don't try and cut too quickly or cut too tightly. Just nice and easy. And you get a super clean edge right here. We're going to repeat that on all 4 sides and repeat that on every part, and we'll be ready to apply it to the structure. Okay, we're down to our last piece we've just trimmed out. This is the very center piece and the tower will go in here, so we need to remove just this section here, not this one. In this case, you could cut it from the inside, or if you come back here and just run right along the edge of the openings, you should be able to remove the majority of that vellum very, very carefully, not to go all the way through the wood. Take your time, clean it up just a little bit. And now with that cleaned up, all of my atrium faces are trimmed out and we're ready to set up to start gluing to the structure. Alright, I've brought in my structure that I've just added a super light coat of paint, except for on the back I've added a little extra paint because it'll be viewable. None of the rest of this will be seen while the house is set up. The first step in creating the faces is you take this piece that's in the middle, the two long rectangles sit on either side. Now before you start gluing, you need to determine which edge you want to be seen most. These three top pieces, you will see the leading edges all the way around. So for example, while I was trimming this, right here I got a little tight and I actually trimmed a little bit of the paint off. Well, I might come back later and just touch that up with paint, but what I want to do is make sure that that's facing backwards on the atrium instead of being visible on the front. So I'm going to set that in place. I'm going to look at this one and it looks pretty good here as well. And you'll push these together and flush up the back across the back here. Then we'll center it on the structure here, as well as pushing it up flush with the back, and that's where we start setting things up. The first part you're going to glue in after we get everything aligned, you'll glue in this piece here, then you'll glue in one of the sides, then the other side. Then we'll add on the two end caps, then we'll add these two front pieces, then the two smaller front pieces, then the face. So to line this up, we're just going to make sure that the backs are flush on all three pieces, and then we're going to center on this face here. It needs to go a little bit this direction, and we're going to keep it flush across the back. And once you're certain the parts are in place where you want them, what you're going to do is you're going to hold the side piece, one of them, and don't let it move. Then we add glue here, glue this piece down, wait till it's dry, then we can remove these two side pieces. That way we don't have to have it glued and try and center it all at once. So since I've got this about pretty much right where I want it, I'm going to keep this piece here. I'm going to add just a little bit of glue around these edges here and then lay this piece down. Keep in mind that on this front here, we don't want glue pushing out into the window space, so we'll keep the glue out on closer to the outer edges. Now we set it up flush across the back, make sure that it's mostly centered to the structure underneath here, and then apply pressure and allow it to glue. Keep in mind you're gluing to vellum, so you're going to want to make sure you hold it a little extra longer to allow that super glue to do its job. Once the center piece is glued down right where we want it, it makes it a lot easier to get the two side pieces. So all we're going to do is make sure that we're going to line up the back of this is flush and make sure that it's flush with the back of the structure, and looks pretty good, so we'll go ahead and glue down. Now make note that this structure is right up against these edges, so make sure you put the glue right out on the edge of the structure and not here close to the opening. On the back side, same thing, keep it close to the back. Along here and along here it won't be a problem. So we'll go ahead and add glue. After you've added the glue, when you're ready to set this in there, be super careful not to allow it to shift around once you touch it down. So we set this back corner first, hold it in place, and slowly allow it to drop, and make sure that this back corner is aligned with the back as well, and then very gently apply pressure and hold until dry. We'll repeat the process on the other side. We're now ready to add the end cap. In that case, it's going to be this one right here. Make note that it will sit up underneath the leading edge of this, and it will be flush with the back face. What we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of glue here and here, and then we're going to also add a tiny bit right through this groove so that the top edge will hit that. To finish up this edge, we're going to open it up like this, and we need to add a touch of glue right in this corner here just to hold this edge down. You'll see there's just a touch there, and then we're going to hold it until it glues in and the corner will be nice and tight as well. And now repeat on the other side. Okay, we're ready for this side angled piece. I've taken the atrium and put it on its back with the top facing me so that we can just set this piece in here just like this. You'll line it back here so it's nice and clean, and you'll note that the structures all line up right underneath the window or under the structure where it belongs. So we'll do the same process. We'll add a little bit of glue across the face here, a little bit of glue on each one of these, and then in this case we're just going to put a couple of quick dots of glue on this edge. There's not a lot of surface, but maybe just enough to hold this without flapping. We'll add a little extra glue later. And repeat on the other side. One thing you'll note, setting these in places, this inside edge is thinner than the outside edge. And you do that so that the structure will align accordingly with these spaces. If you go the other direction, it's offset and you may end up seeing these through the lights. So we'll go ahead and do the same process, add glue and glue it down. Okay, we're down to these two side pieces now. We have a gluing surface here, and underneath here the same thing. It'll set in just like this. So we're going to add the glue up here, and then on these two small areas here. And finally, the very front piece. Same as others, it's going to sit underneath that front lip and lay down. In this case, you're going to want to center it between the two side pieces as best you can. So we're going to add glue up underneath this rim and right along here, and then we're going to put a couple of dots of glue along there and set this in place. And there she is. The atrium is complete. Well, I want to thank you for watching this atrium assembly instruction video. We're excited to provide this for you. You'll see it's all finished up and pretty now. One last couple of notes. These tabs on the bottom here that stick out deep, those will be used to keep the atrium centered on top of the structure. So be sure and subscribe, and let us know if you have any questions or comments. You can contact us on our website, on our Etsy shop, or you can comment down below. Thanks.